podcast in which one man strives to level up his geekhood and helping you do the same, one battle at a time. Now, let's get geeky with Gamer Leaf.
Two kings who have hated each other for a lifetime, feuding for centuries, assemble their armies, filled with church officials, knights, and lowly peasants in need of employment, to battle over disputed territory.
But wait, Trevor, isn't that just chess?
Ah, it was, until all the ranking officers got drunk and started stumbling about.
A king sending orders to charge, a lifeless charge against opposing cavalry. The pawns are tired, morale is weak. They grow tired, they grow angry of the overweight royalty. Why should the pawns take the brunt of the force? The bishops have eaten so much they occupy multiple squares and can barely move.
Moreover, the knights have a midlife crisis and decide that they too want to join the clergy.
On the pawn side, the battle is pitched. Underpaid peasants looking at an army of elephants and mercenaries on the opposing side. And then, blizzard.
Not to mention the invisible rabbits coming out of time vortexes, and the vixens that are trying to seduce army members.
Sound familiar to you guys? It didn't sound familiar to me neither, but that is a story of Random Coping Chess, a new game on Kickstarter, and tonight we have on the pleasure of having on the podcast with us Trevor and Isaac, who are the masterminds and creators behind that game. Is that correct? Is that how you guys fit into the line?
That's correct.
Sure is.
Really, Isaac is the mind and I'm the master.
Okay, so you must be Trevor, just so people know who's talking when they're talking.
Yeah, I'm Trevor Kalkis.
Okay, and what do you sound like, Isaac, in case anybody didn't catch that?
I sound approximately like this.
There you go, there you go.
Isaac sounds many different ways, often.
Just an approximation, though, I guess.
Yeah, well, isn't life an approximation?
There you go.
And that's what this game's all about.
There you go, there you go. So let's rewind a little bit to go back before the game or whatnot. How did you guys get into tabletop board gaming? Do you want to go first, Isaac?
Sure. Well, I'm not sure I'd call myself an avid gamer. I started chess when I was in 3rd grade. I thought it was great. I played my father only, and then I decided that if I wanted to become good, I would have to memorize books of openings. I found that dull, and I left chess that year. And after that, it's just been within the family gatherings, these sorts of things. And of course, for some reason, constant fantasies about different versions of the board games, which is what led us here.
Well, there you go, there you go. What about yourself, Trevor? How did you get into tabletop board gaming?
Coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, I also started playing chess in 3rd grade. I was part of my school's chess team. But very similarly, I didn't really stick with the game. My dad is an avid gamer in general, though, and so he would introduce us to all sorts of new games. He's not the kind who can sit still and just have a conversation. He likes to be doing things all the time, so constantly introducing new games to us. And then in college, I actually took a class on game design and got more into gaming then. And then I got introduced to all sorts of things through that. And then when Isaac came to me with Random Coping Chess, I decided that this was the game.
Cool bean. So, besides Random Coping Chess, do you guys have a favorite game besides that? They might drag me out on the street and have me hung if I let you guys pick your game.
Well, I'd say my favorite game in general is Telephone Pictionary. Now, I don't think that counts as a tabletop game, but it is my favorite.
Telephone Pictionary? Is that like Pictionary, but you're playing over the phone, or what is that?
It means you have a group of, say, 11 people all sitting in a circle. Each person has a piece of paper. You each have one minute to write a sentence. You pass it to your left. They have 1 minute to illustrate your sentence. They fold over the sentence. The next person has 1 minute to write a sentence from the illustration, and so on.
Oh, wow. I like the sounds of that. Cool. I never heard of that game before. And what about yourself?
Telephone Pictionary has to be one of my favorites as well, even though it's a less traditional game. But I I wasn't introduced to Dungeons and Dragons until pretty late in my life, and so it's still relatively new to me. And the first time I played, I was infatuated with it. So I'll have to say that ranks in one of my uh, top one because largely because of the group of people that I play with. We just have a really good silly time.
There you go. Well, that's what it's all about. What character are you?
I was a Dragonborn and Rogue, which is a weird combination. My name was Omzig, which is Gizmo backwards, and Gizmo is my nickname with the friends that I play with.
Okay, cool. I mean, so what is exactly as a dragonborn? So you're like a dragon?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a scaly reptilian person, still hominoid, but I could breathe lightning bolts, and I was dual wielding tomahawks. And I'm not sure if I came from a womb or an egg, but it was a pretty regular discussion in the game, but never really settled.
Okay, cool. I mean, so word on the street is you guys have a new game on Kickstarter. What can you tell us about it?
Trevor, you want to start?
Sure. What I can tell you about it is that it's a game. If I had to summarize Random Coping Chess, it's a game that kind of meets all other games in the middle. There's a lot of strategy to it, but there's also a lot of storytelling to it. There's also a lot of chance to it. I think it's really rare to find the combination of things that we have. To someone who plays a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, I would say that it's a good role-playing game for beginners, for people who don't feel really comfortable like taking on a character, but like the idea of having a story to their game. It's a good introduction that way. But for avid chess players who are trying to get their friends to play more chess, I would say this is a fun way to engage people with chess that kind of has a story, adds a story to it, makes it more engaging than chess might be otherwise to new players. Also levels the playing field so that people of two different levels can play each other and still have a good time. But I'd also even say that like tabletop war games like Risk, kind of have the same feeling as this in its world conquest way, but we've put it into chess. There's like some card games. We get like elements of like Magic the Gathering, when sometimes you get to draw multiple of the cards and then you get to choose which ones you play to change the game. So I would say it's like a soft introduction to almost any game that you would want to make more accessible to your friends who don't play as many games as you do.
The button here, just to explain, when you listen to Trevor speaking, it might be very unclear how one game could be between a lot of different games. And I think the reason why he gets away with saying this is that the actions in the game are determined by random cards that one draws. And because we have complete control over what the cards are, we have just sort of pieced together bits and pieces from our favorite games or genres of games. So in this way, it's sort of like a universal Turing machine, if you will. It's able to imitate whatever it wants.
Okay, cool beans. So looking at your Kickstarter and whatnot, it looks like, yeah. The first thing I actually noticed is the art on the actual chessboard. What can you tell us about that?
So the board that we used for that was just one of the boards that Isaac owns. It was just the board that we were playing the game on. The nice thing is that you can play the game on any board. It's completely accessible. As long as you have a chessboard, you can play the game. The magic is really in the cards, and Isaac painted the design on the reverse side of our cards on gold foil. If you want to talk about it, Isaac.
I guess so. If you'll scroll down to the bottom of the Kickstarter, you'll notice an image of the back of the card. And this is an image I painted on 23 karat gold leaf. So my father is an artisan and he does a lot of work in churches. So he had a lot of gold leaf left over. And I paint in oils and egg tempera. And this is a painting in egg tempera. It is a variant on a detail of The Temptation of St. Anthony by the medieval artist Hieronymus Bosch, although I included a Celtic knot as an homage to my Irish heritage.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it looks like a pretty cool picture looking at that. That's awesome. And that's what the one with the, are they goats and snails, or what are those animals in the corners?
Yeah, so on the corners you have a snail goat. So those are actually from illuminated manuscripts. I didn't paint those. Those are directly from 12th century manuscripts. So you have snail goats and various warrior snails, which beats me and beats all the scholars, but seems to have been a big trend in medieval art, is snails that were well armed. And the piece in the center, which is a tree person entwined with a mouse that it is riding, holding another mouse. That is the one I did.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. Cool beans. So, so when you back this game, do you get the chess pieces or just the cards, or what all do you get?
So when you there's different levels, and on the most basic level, or at the $10 level, you get the deck of cards, and that's really all you need. You need that and a chessboard and a die to play, and you might get characters that aren't in your traditional game of chess. For example, there might be a coyote, or there might be a necromancer. And when you get those characters, the way that we've played is we've just found almost any item that will fit on our chessboard and given it the character and added it to the board. Um, if you pledge the $30 amount, then we'll 3D print the side characters for you to, and that'll be delivered to you, and you can use those 3D printed characters whenever you draw a card like Coyote or Necromancers. But it's also really fun, just like if you have a Lego set, it's really fun just to get your Lego pieces on the board and have them take on characters in your war that is chess.
So, if we were to sit down and play this game, what would it look like? Well, I mean, what would it sound like, or how do you play it, as we're on a podcast so they can't see us?
Okay, so you start out your typical way, a chessboard setup, very vanilla. Starts out looking like normal chess. And before the first move is made by white, you flip over a card and you follow the instructions on that card. And this card could do basically anything. We have done hundreds of different cards. Some of them are very innocuous. They may change the way a certain piece moves very slightly, or you may control a different type of piece. Some of them are massive changes to the game. It may change the geology of the board, or it may add in time portals or other mind-bending things. And gameplay advances as in normal chess, but with some probability every turn, you draw another card which further alters the rules of the game. And so, as time goes on, the game you play gets further and further from what you would originally call chess.
Oh, the kids want to play. Dad, can we play Random Coping Chess right now?
That's pretty cool. What kind of instrument is that?
It's called the low whistle. It's a version of a flute from Ireland. It's riffing on the Hobbit theme song there.
Oh, cool. You don't want to play a tune for us, do you, on the podcast?
Sure, well, I guess it'll be appropriate to play Lord of the Rings theme track.
Cool beans. That's awesome. And you call that what kind of instrument again? Some kind of flute?
Yeah, so it's technically a whistle, although who's listening? But it's called the low whistle. It's the less common cousin of the penny whistle or the tin whistle that you may have heard of. It's a very simple traditional instrument called a penny whistle because you can buy it for a penny back in the day when a penny was worth something.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's pretty cool. You've been playing that for a long time?
Medium long. Actually, the same, my roommate with whom I initially created the game Random Coping Chess, he got me a whistle, and I'd had them around growing up, so I used to play it when I was stressed from school.
Well, there you go. Now you play Random Coping Chess instead of playing that, or you do both now?
I try to do both.
So, do each of you have a favorite card in Random Coping Chess that you can tell us about?
Oh, man. So many favorites for so many different reasons. Let's see. For instance, one of my favorites, if you're talking simply about strategy, is a very simple one called Blizzard. And what this means is that when you draw it, you each have some time to write down the next 3 moves that you will make. And then once you've written these down, you make them sequentially. And so what this allows you to do, for instance, is you have to speculate about what they're going to do, but you can do very risky things. In 3 moves, for instance, that's enough to move your queen out, go into the middle of their territory, take something, and come back safely. It's actually sometimes enough to take their king. You could kill someone in a blizzard, but then you also have to think about what they're going to do. And that's, in terms of pure strategy, that's had some very interesting consequences, and some people have been massively outsmarted in my experience. Any comments from you, Trevor?
But it said without upkeep. What's that mean?
So upkeep is an optional phase before your turn. So the turn structure is such that first you have upkeep, then you possibly draw a card, then you take your move. And upkeep means some cards have things that'll happen at the beginning of your turn. For instance, some cards create autonomous characters, and they will move during your upkeep. Or another one of my favorite cards, the Plague. The Plague is a highly infectious disease which is passed from piece to piece, and during your upkeep is when it is transmitted. So the upkeep, you don't really need to understand it very well abstractly. Just some cards say do something like this before your turn.
Okay. Cool. What about yourself, Trevor? Do you got some favorite cards?
Yeah. So I really like the one that we've named Erebus, because it completely transforms a lot of the strategies. And Erebus is like one of those autonomous pieces, but it moves the exact same way as whatever you move during. But whatever, it's kind of a shadow. You can think of it as a shadow. It does take space. But if the shadow lands on one of your pieces, it demotes that piece. So a queen would become a rook would become bishop. Bishop would become a knight would become a pawn, and a pawn would be obliviated. And so every time you make a move, you're not just trying to progress your standing, but you're also trying to think about where you're going to place the shadow and where could they move next to make sure that the shadow doesn't demote too many of your valuable pieces.
I want to say I never really played it too much, but it kind of reminds me of, minus the chess aspect, a game called Flux, where the rules change for each card or whatnot.
Yeah, so I've gotten a lot of feedback from people being like, "Oh, it sounds like Flux added to chess," and it is very similar to that, where the rules kind of change as you go along, and so there's still strategy, but sometimes the rule will mess up the strategy that you've been working on all game, and then you have to adjust and cope.
Which personally, I think that's one of my favorite parts of the game. As you may have noticed from the Kickstarter video, I like chess, but in general, it's very difficult for me to lose because it feels like a defeat of my intellect, of my ego or something. But I love the strategy aspect, but I wish it weren't stressful. So what this shifting strategy allows one to do is at any one move, there's a lot of strategy. There's a lot of funny things you have to think about, and it's a lot of thought involved. But ultimately, you can't really be attached to the outcome of your actions because something's going to change, and it'll all be for naught. So it allows you to think strategically, yet not worry about who's going to win. At least that's how I see it.
And a big part of that too is it's impossible to be like competitive in this game because things shift all the time. Rather than you really like trying to duke it out with your opponent, it's more of you guys trying to weather whatever randomness is thrown at you, and it kind of becomes a bonding experience more than a competitive experience.
That's great. So how do you win the game? Are you still trying to capture the other person's king, or how do you win in random coping chess?
Well, you sure are trying to capture their king, and to be specific, you're not trying to checkmate, because in some cases, checkmate doesn't make sense. You're actually trying to take their king. Although this being said, there are rules that alter the game. So some cards will change what the objective is, but they are few and far between.
Okay.
Just to be a little more concise about that, the king in normal chess ends with checkmate, but because the cards change the rules, sometimes checkmate doesn't mean that the king is guaranteed to be taken. Sometimes you can draw one last card, and it's like a Deus ex machina, right, where it saves the king last minute. Meanwhile, a card can change the rules and like suddenly put the king in check, and we call that a royal screwing. And so the king actually has to be captured for the game to end, and sometimes the randomness can save the king.
Okay, cool.
And also, another interesting thing, which I like from a technical background, is there's something called probabilistic check, which means you may frequently have a situation where you have a 1/5 probability of taking the king. And so you can choose, if you are in a probabilistic check, whether you want to risk it. Anyways, another wrinkle.
Oh boy, cool beans. So yeah, that's a really interesting take on it. So you're just trying to have the king be on your team, is that, if I'm understanding correctly? Instead of just checkmate?
Take the king, yeah, you're trying to capture it.
Okay. Cool beans. That's awesome. So, let's see. Per se, somebody's fallen asleep. It wouldn't be because of you or your game, but suddenly it'd be because of me and my podcast, how many we release during the week or whatnot. So per se, they've suddenly been jolted awake, so they don't hit that oncoming traffic. Why should they take a chance on Random Coping Chess, especially with all the other great games that are out there on Kickstarter currently?
Trevor, you want to go for this one?
Sure. I think Random Coping Chess is a rare game that can bring people together and bring an old game, being chess, back to life, right? So I think it's engaging in ways that chess normally isn't, but retains the base relatability that not necessarily all games have. So chess is a game that's been perfected strategically over hundreds of generations of lifetime of it being played. But we're getting into an age where people's attention spans, as you've said, with them falling asleep, can be as short as seconds. So if you have, instead of saying like, oh, I move my rook to a5, now you're playing chess and you say, I move my invisible rabbit into the time vortex. Suddenly it's a lot easier to pay attention.
Now, Trevor, I think that's a really good answer. I think I'll add that from my perspective, the way I feel about chess is sort of the way I felt about so many would-be lovers of mine who, one felt so fondly for, but it just never quite worked out. You can't abolish that fundamental feeling of love for them, yet also it's impossible to change the relationship. And for me, chess is like that. I have a deep-seated love for it, yet I still can't really play it because it stresses me out, and also in some ways it's very bland. So this allows me to revive my love for this, as Trevor says, to bring the game back alive for me, and just add for me, a very highly silly aspect to it. And I'm a silly person. I enjoy this.
Oh man, I like Isaac's answer so much better. Can you use that in the podcast?
It's the same answer, just different words, Trevor.
But you use beautiful words, Isaac.
You're the mind, I'm the master.
There we go. Cool beans. So great. And I don't know if either of you have listened to the podcast, but the next portion of the podcast is called Adventures in Application Acquisition, where we talk about an application, whether it be for a cell phone, tablet, or video game, or even computer. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to chess or tabletop board gaming. Is there an application that either of you use that we can talk about for a moment?
You mean like for the game?
Sorry, an application?
No, just an application in general that you use a lot of. It doesn't have to be related to the game or anything like that.
Yeah, let's see.
Like a computer application, you mean?
That works, or cell phone or tablet or anything, yeah.
Okay, I see. Yes.
So there's my house I live with 3 other people, and at one point I lived in a house of 10 people. and we share all of our expenses all the time. And so I use an app called Splitwise to share all those. Whenever you buy groceries, you put onto the app how much money you spent on groceries, and then it splits it evenly between all the house members. And so that's been like a extremely useful tool for my managing my life.
Okay, cool beans. So is that on iOS or Android or both, or?
Both, yeah.
And do you know if was it a cost related or is it a free application?
Free.
Cool beans. And if you own the rights to that application, what would be one thing you would do to make it better?
I'd add a music playing element to it. So whenever the amount that you owed to your housemates got bigger, it would play more dramatic music. You know, if you only owed them $10, it would play like a nice little melody to remind you to pay them at a certain hour every day. But then if you owed them like thousands of dollars, you'd have like dun 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 dun.
There you go.
It's not broken.
So yeah, if the creators of that are listening right now, even if they not right this second, but it's hopefully going to be a green podcast. So if they ever listen, hopefully they'll go ahead and fix that for you, so it'll be a better application. So minus coming there to your hometown to stalk you, how would people go about finding out about you guys or Random Coping Chess?
Well, the website's an easy start, and we have an email, a Gmail address there, randomcopingchess@gmail.com. So if you are interested in us, you can email us there and we can take it the rest of the way. I live in a collective house in an undisclosed location, and if you seem trustworthy, then I might invite you over for dinner or something.
Well, there you go. So you figured out how to get invitation to dinner. You just got to be trustworthy enough and then get that email over to the right email address, and we'll make sure we leave everything in the show notes. But definitely check out their Kickstarter. We'll leave that in the show notes as well. And we wanted to thank you all for coming on Getting Geeky with Gamerleaf. We really appreciate your time.
And thanks for having us.
No problem.
Gamerleaf levels up. Tune in next week to see if Gamerleaf's luck holds up.